Hey, it's Jeffrey Gurian here for the Comedy Matters TV podcast, coming to you directly from the stage of the legendary comedy club, The Comic Strip, on 81st and 2nd in the heart of Manhattan. And every week I'm going to be bringing you interesting guests, not only from the comedy world, but from the world of entertainment in general, people who have something positive to say, because I want the show to be the home of positive energy. That's always been my goal, is to put positive energy out to the universe. To counteract all the negativity that's in the world today. There's too much anger, too much hatred, and just I want to carry a positive message. That's the goal of this show.
The last, 50 years now, this hair has been in comedy rooms and comedy events, festivals, and everybody always says the same thing. Who the fuck is that guy? And I tell you, it's an honor and a pleasure to speak to this hair and this head.
And you stand the fuck out.
Jeffrey, wonderful to see you. I skipped every other interview. I came straight to here.
I can't say no to you. I've known you my whole career. I can't say no to Jeff. No one can say no to him. Ask him. Who says no to you?
According to Paul Provenza, nobody.
People say to me, it seems like you know everybody in comedy. And I really don't. I just know the people that my circles have been intersected and I've gotten to know. You actually do know everybody in the comedy world, don't you? You really do.
It's crazy, right?
Even comedians. If you don't know Jeffrey, then you're probably not a comedian. You're not really a comedian.
You're almost like a genetic marker for comedians. You go, do you know Jeffrey Gurian? No, you're not a real comic.
I'm envious of Jeff. It's a righteous thing, man. It really is. Jeff is amazing.
Oh, my co-star.
You're the second coolest dude I know, next to you.
People love you, Jeffrey, and everybody. You have more access to more people than anyone I know in comedy, and it's because people enjoy you.
You're the best, Jeffrey. Thank you so much, buddy. Too, man.
If you don't know who Jeffrey Gurian is, if you've seen someone where you're like, who the fuck is that? That's Jeffrey Gurian.
And here to take you to that happy place is your host, the Doctor of Happiness, the Impresario of Fun, the Maharaja of Merriment, the Czar of Zany, the Ambassador of Amusement, Jeffrey Gurian.
Hey everybody, it's Jeffrey Gurian here at the Comic Strip, your host of the Comedy Matters TV, the podcast. And I'm here on the stage of the legendary club, the Comic Strip, where Jerry Seinfeld and Adam Sandler recently did their Netflix specials. It was the home of Eddie Murphy, where Chris Rock was discovered. Jim Gaffigan came out of here, Ray Romano. All the biggest stars came out of this one club. And so I'm honored to do the podcast from the stage of this iconic place. And again, my message is always to bring positivity. So my guest today is a very unique person in New York City. We've heard of Instagram influencers. This guy is a New York influencer, which is not easy to do. He has a very eclectic background, and he's done everything, really. If you've ever been to a nightclub in New York City, he's probably owned it. And he's also a movie producer and an event producer. But he has a very interesting story, which was really what inspired me to have him here today, because he's overcome a lot of obstacles to get where he's gotten. And so I want you to give a warm welcome to my friend Noel Ashman. Noel, great to see you, man.
Great seeing you.
And thanks so much for coming on today.
Of course, intimidated to be here with all those names.
Well, they're all names. I mean, talk about names. You've been with some of the biggest names in show business. But I'm fascinated by your story. We sat recently and we talked together, and you told me about your background. And I mean, it's true. You're involved in everything, but you're also involved in politics. And I want to talk about your early story, though, because that really fascinated me. Because everybody thought that you were successful because you have a well-known dad, if you don't mind me saying that, right? You have. Yeah. I used to be a dentist, and I went to NYU, and there's a whole thing, the Arthur Ashman facility. Your dad was very well known in the implant field, and I know that he actually invented something that changed the world of dentistry, like some kind of bone, right? Like an artificial bone. But yeah. You actually wound up doing everything on your own. Could you speak about your early life? Because to me, that's where to start from.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, to my father, it was always very important that, my father came from a very lower middle class family in Queens, was first in his immediate family to go to college. So he, never wanted me to have anything. He wanted me to really, always wanted me to do it myself. And when he got divorced from my mother, I would go through long periods not seeing him, so his success didn't really affect my world at all growing up.
But you started working at 5 years old, if I recall, right? Was that when you had your first job?
Well, my first actual job was when I was 4 years old.
Oh, really?
I called it my job. In nursery school, when we would all do pictures, we would all be doodling as part of the course of nursery school, I guess. I used to collect everyone's paintings at the end and go upstairs above the school and sell them for $1 a piece. And it was kind of, who wouldn't, passing at school, see some 4-year-old kid think he's probably starving. So I used to do very well with that. And my mother had a house in Fire Island where I used to, there's no cars in Fire Island if you haven't been there.
Yeah,
So-
I have been there. It's one of the reasons I didn't go back.
Right, yeah.
I'm used to driving everywhere. I can't be
Exactly.
like walking. Isn't that those water taxis?
Yeah, it can be a little claustrophobic there sometimes. But anyway, it was good for me at the time because people would kind of land, the ferries would land and people would get off and have luggage. So I would have these little wagons where I would take people's luggage from the ferry to their house. And so many people would need wagons, I got a bunch of kids to work for me. So I would have like 20 or 30 kids in like 3 different communities, all with walkie-talkies. And we'd catch every ferry from, I think, 7 in the morning till like midnight.
Even at that age, at that young age, you were organizing stuff.
I was organized. Those were my first quote unquote jobs. But I've always had a job straight since then. I've worked as a delivery boy at the Chicken Kitchen, which was a job for many years. I worked in a dental office as an assistant. I've worked as a gardener's assistant. I've worked in a real estate office as a gopher. Just all kinds of odd jobs I've had. So I've never had a moment that I didn't have some kind of job since I was 4 years old.
And when did you start promoting parties and events? Because that really took you on a path on your early life and into adulthood. You started promoting parties, and I think it was in high school. Is that correct?
Junior high school, actually.
Junior high school, yeah. Tell us.
Well, my parents gave me my start, actually. The one thing, although my parents were divorced, the one thing they could agree upon was that I needed to go to boarding school when I was 12, which was something I did not want to do because I love New York, and the last thing I wanted to do was go to boarding school. So it was something I said, absolutely, I'm not going to go. So they had decided, probably the only time they spoke since they had gotten divorced when I was about 2, was to send me to boarding school. And I said I wouldn't go. And there were a lot of issues at the time. My mom had a boyfriend I wasn't getting along with very well, and we were having all kinds of problems. I wasn't a bad kid. I mean, I never did drugs, ever.
Mm-hmm.
I never did anything crazy, but I did like to go out. I used to love to play video games at that time. And in Times Square, they had all the arcades. So I used to go there and stay there till 4 in the morning just playing video games. It was my favorite thing to do. So obviously at 11 years old, my mom, and 12, my mom wasn't very fond of that. So we would get into some issues with that. So anyway, they agreed they were going to send me to boarding school. I agreed I wasn't. We had a huge fight, and they kicked me out of the house.
At 12 years old.
At 12 years old.
Right.
Well, I was going on 13. So it was
well, that's a big difference.
Yeah, it was.
You were 13.
Yeah, it was basically 13. It was a summer when I turned 13. So what I did, at the time, I worked as a gopher at a real estate office, and my boss liked me because I was a very hard worker, and I was sort of doing every odd job in the office for years. So I went to him, and I knew there were some places he wasn't renting. So I asked if I could get, and I knew his rent roll because I obviously did it. So I knew there was one place he wasn't renting in particular on 73rd and Columbus. It was just, I believe it had been a walk-in closet years before it got converted to like
They were passing it off as an apartment, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was literally, you could fit a little, I remember I had a little single bed, like the smallest bed you could possibly get, and I had this little TV that must have been like that big. And I remember you couldn't fit them both side by side because it wasn't wide enough. So you had to put the TV in front of the bed, and then there was like one flame, which was my stove, and I had a little cheap like 20-year-old toaster oven, and that was it. And the shower was so small you had to like put your hands together to take a shower because it wasn't big enough to have your hands out.
Even at 13.
But it was mine, even at 13.
But it was yours.
But it was mine. And living at 73rd in Columbus, I was right above the old Tommy Hilfiger store, was just amazing at 13. It was like, wow. But the problem I had was I was a football player back then, and that was like my whole thing. I love football, et cetera, et cetera. So I practiced a lot. I had a lot of practices. I worked out. I had to work out X number of times.
But were you in school?
I was in school, yeah.
So you went to school. You didn't go to boarding school. You stayed in public school.
I stayed in. Well, at that point, I'd actually been in private school. But I went to public school actually, I went to school in Harlem, actually, in the very beginning. But eventually, when I was about 9, my parents' divorce had kicked in. So my father paid for private school. So the only thing my father ever really paid for at that time was my private school.
But in the early days, you went to school in Harlem. I think you told me that you were one of the only white kids there, right?
I believe I was the only.
The only white.
At a couple of schools I went to. One of the first ones was on 118th and Morningside Drive, which now might not sound quite so bad, being that it's not too far from Columbia University. But at that time, when I was a kid, it was. I might as well have been in Beirut at the time. I mean,
it's not great now either. Believe
me. That's
where that girl got killed recently.
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
But back then, it was. It was just, no one understood why I was there. People would just look at me like, what is this little white kid doing here? So it was a little tough. But when when I moved out, I needed to figure my after school job. I couldn't work too many hours because I also had football practice and stuff.
And you had to pay rent, right? This was not a free apartment.
No.
You had to pay rent.
I was paying cash.
So you're 13 years old. So what'd you do?
So I was not making enough money at my job to cover it. So what I did was I started thinking about different ways I could make money on the weekends, which was the only time I ever had time when I didn't have a football game. Usually we played Saturdays, so I usually had like Saturday, Sunday. And I realized that all my friends at the time, who were all my age, a little older, most of my friends were a little bit older. So if I was 12, 13, they were probably 14, 15. And there's a weird age when you grow up in New York City where you don't want to just go to the movies every weekend and go to some ice cream store and go home. You're a little old for that, but you're not old enough yet to really get in the clubs. I mean, I was luckily able. I looked a little bit older, so there were probably 10 of us that were able to get in the clubs back then. But the vast majority of kids could not. So basically, they were,
they had nothing to do. Yeah.
So what was happening at the time is everyone would, whoever's parents were away, it would be party at their house. So everyone would go to their house. So we'd have hundreds of kids piling into someone's house. And
did you use the term free house in those days? We used to call it a free house when we were kids.
I don't know
somebody has a free house.
I don't know what we called it, but it was a destroyed house, and we were done with it. That I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I remember their story. TVs get thrown out the window. The house would be demolished every time this happened. So parents very quickly got wise to that and
I would think,
a housekeeper or someone there. No one was doing that again.
It's hard to watch your TV when it's on the street.
Exactly. I could go on for hours about those stories. But so what happened? So I was thinking to myself, well, everyone needs a place to go, and I had a thought at the time of when you live in the suburbs, everyone has these keggers where you could put it in some field. Put a bunch of kegs.
A keg party. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. In New York, it's harder to do that, of course, so there's no place to do it, and no one wants to have a bunch of 13-year-old and 14-year-old drunk kids running around. But I figured at the time, Soho at the time was kind of a slum. We had a lot of artists, a lot of cool underground artists there who really needed money. So I got this idea. I used to go to the Village Voice. They had all these ads for, rent an office space rent a loft space for, photography, whatever you wanted to do. Maybe they rent it for a party. So I used to call hundreds of these every day at Monday morning, I think is when it came out. As soon as it came out, I would call everyone. I'd always find one who, you want to do a cake party, whatever. So, I wouldn't lie to them because we tried that once and that didn't work well. So I would tell them the truth. So basically I would rent these lofts. I would buy a bunch of kegs of beer, and strangely, I don't know why, but I never got carded back then. I don't know why.
Really?
I looked older, I guess.
Well, and I think things were less strict then too.
They were definitely less strict. Oh, definitely, they were less strict. But it was also, that I guess because I was on my own, I had a certain maturity about me that I guess most 13-year-old
Yeah,
kids
I mean, how
probably
many
didn't
13-year-old kids have their own apartment? I mean, come on.
Right.
That's crazy.
So for whatever reason, I was lucky.
And are paying for it themselves by working. I mean, it's insane. So, again.
So I was lucky enough to be able to buy the kegs of beer. And a lot of my friends at the time, who I grew up with when I went to some of the rougher schools, had been, let's just say, people outside of the law for the most part.
Exactly.
A lot of guys who were into gangs and were into drugs. Those a lot of the guys I really had grown up with.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would do is a couple of the big dealers I knew had these huge bodyguards. I was like, I need them. Can I borrow them for a night? So they were the security. And we would have these, keg parties, and I'd move them every week. But I remember the first one we did was this place on 52nd and 10th Avenue. It was this sound studio I had convinced to do it. It wasn't very big, held like 250 people. It's the first time we ever did this. I remember I printed up a big flyer that said mid-year bash, $5, all you could drink. And they were like just little pieces of paper. I went to Kinko's and just Xeroxed it. And I gave one to every friend of mine at every private school, like all the girls' schools, like Chapin, Hewitt, Spence, Horace Mann, Fieldston, Riverdale, McBurney, Columbia Prep, Birch Wathen, every
right, all the elite schools where the upper class kids would go,
exactly.
The rich kids,
Exactly. And I remember I had no idea what was going to happen the first time. I was like, I think we could fill it, but I didn't know. It was the first time I ever did it. And I was a bit younger than everyone, so I was still at the time. I think it was in 7th grade at the time. So a lot of the people I needed to get to go were in high school, so they were a little older than me, so I wasn't quite sure how it would work. But I remember we opened it at 9. I remember I went to set it up at like 6 or 7, and I remember we were doing everything, and it was on the 5th floor, so you could kind of see out. And I remember one of my security said, "Dude, you gotta see this." I'm like, "What?" It was like 8:30. It was like half hour before we were opening. I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Look outside the window." And I looked out, and it was just kids. It was on 10th Avenue and 52nd Street. It went all the way down to 11th Avenue and all the way down to 9th Avenue. Wall-to-wall
kids?
Just kids.
Sounds like Woodstock.
It really was. It was like Woodstock for preppy New York kids. And it was, you see all like the high school, jackets, and it was the weirdest thing. And it happened to be one of the problems was it was actually right near the projects. So that wasn't good because they thought it was Christmas. Like let's go mug everybody. So literally, they had to stop traffic on 10th Avenue because cars couldn't get by. It was just wall to wall. You couldn't get near it. So we started. We let the first 250 people in, and then
we estimated the door. Huh?
Yeah, we estimated there must have been like 15,000 kids outside. Easy.
Really?
Maybe
oh
more,
my God.
Maybe more. I mean, it really was every. It was every.
Every kid in the city and their friend and everyone they knew.
Yeah, I mean, any kid who was between let's say 12 and 18 who went to any one of the cities, and this was a lot of kids in the city at that point. Everybody came. Like there was no one who didn't come, which I had no idea was going to happen. Because literally, I said, gave people one flyer and said, "Tell your friends." But every school just like literally came.
And this was back in the 80s, right? Like late 80s.
Yeah, this is the
80s. Yeah.
So I basically the first 250 people got in. The cops came to bust. Well, first things happened is all the project kids came and started mugging everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm looking out the window, seeing all my friends getting mugged.
Even though you had security.
So I'm like, well, they were inside though.
Okay.
So I remember going to one of the big guys who was out front, and I was like, "Dude, you got to stop this." And they're like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because everyone's getting mugged." He's like, "Well, I would be doing it too if you'd have been working here." And I'm like, "Come on, these are my friends. These are good kids. They just, they're not used to this."
Yeah.
And so I had to convince them to go and stop everyone from mugging. And I remember he stood up and said, "Everybody, please have your attention. Please stop mugging the white kids."
That's hilarious.
And all the guys like, "Why?" Like, because if you do, I'm going to come out there and kill you. And he had like a megaphone or something.
That's so funny.
And all the preppy kids were clapping. Thank you. It was, and then the cops came and busted everybody, including everything got busted. So it didn't go particularly well as far as making too much money because we couldn't get everyone in.
Yeah, I was going to say, but at least it must have paid your rent for that month.
Yeah. But what it did do is make me realize that I think I got something here that'll work. So I needed to fine tune it, but I knew I had a product that people wanted to go to, and that's how it started. And then I started moving them every week so the cops wouldn't bust us.
But you kept on doing it in different locations.
Every other week.
And were you finding larger and larger venues?
I was. I started getting venues that were 2,000 people,
really?
3,000 people.
You were filling them.
I don't think we ever did a party where we didn't fill it and would have been able to fill it 3 times more if we had the room. I mean, I could have probably filled Madison Square Garden at that point. Well, that might be a little exaggeration, but I mean, literally, I had the ability to pull 15, 20,000 kids almost any time I did anything.
Wow, that is unheard. 15 or 20,000 kids.
Yeah.
Were Noah Tepperberg and Jason Strauss part of that group? Because I know they went.
They were a little bit
the
younger.
guys that have the Tao organization.
Yeah,
they were a little younger. Right?
They were a bit younger.
I
actually booked some of their parties back then.
Oh, really?
But later, so they came.
Later years.
Later.
They came
and
later years.
I think Noah. I think Noah went to school in Long Island or something. So it was a little bit of a different.
Because they were
scene.
doing stuff in high school too. It's very rare to be able
Yeah.
to start something that young and then build it into like an empire, which is basically what you did. So your first real club though was I think 1996 when you opened Veruka.
That was the first club I owned, but I had run a bunch of clubs. I did Life right before that.
Oh, I remember Life,
which I was promotional director
great.
at.
Tuesday nights at Life. That was a crazy.
Yeah, and Thursdays I did. Yeah, usually I did Thursday, Friday, Saturday were the ones I focused on. But it was Life was great. And I did every club before that. I opened Club USA. I opened Tunnel both times. It opened when John Doe owned it, and then when Gation took it over.
Oh, when Peter Gation, who owned the Limelight.
Yes,
he took it over.
He took over in '91. I did the reopening of that. So I did every club. Tattoo at the time. I did.
On
Mark
50th
Fleischman's
Street,
place,
Tattoo. Yeah, sure.
So I did all those clubs back then. So I was, when I got to about 16, when I found my crowd. Most of my people were, as I said, a bit older. So even like 15, I think it was probably 15, where most of my friends were 18, 19. So I sort of was able to transition from lofts to clubs, which is always what I wanted to do. Because lofts it was a little scary. I mean, you never knew who was going to, we had gangs trying to infiltrate the parties and get in to mug everybody. Because a lot of these kids were, obviously, very well to do. So it was kind of like, all the there were a bunch of gangs back then who used to try to get into the parties so they could rob everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to have my guy stopping that. I eventually got policemen, off-duty or retired policemen, to work for me.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Which helped us not get busted as much and kind of had some armed security at that point, which was important. But I always wanted to do clubs. So I think I was 15 or 16, I did a party at a club called Laura Bell.
Oh, I remember Laura Bell. Yeah, I do. Yeah,
which was beautiful. Beautiful venue. Buzz O'Keefe who owned the Water Club. And I don't know how I had convinced him to let me do a party there, but somehow I did. I don't
maybe because you could bring 15 to 20,000 people. That's usually an incentive.
Yeah, it's an incentive, but it was. I mean, we're still young,
right?
But the good thing with Laura Bell is you had to have a coat and tie to come in,
mm-hmm.
so everyone had to dress, and that was a big thing. And I did this party which I launched on Thanksgiving called the Pilgrim Ball, which kind of had all the social New York kids. It kind of had mimicked a charity party where you have all these, committee members of all kind of the who's who of New York society, and usually it's for charity. I kind of mimicked it and started doing it for our parties for like Thanksgiving. And I did this party called Pilgrim Ball that night. And I remember everyone had to wear a coat and tie. And a couple of my friends were dating actors at the time, and I ended up getting a lot of actors and a lot of big names who came to that. And every club who I'd been begging to let me do parties for years suddenly started calling me and saying like, "Hey, can you do a party here?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to," And that's how I was able to transition. It was really that one party where just.
Do you remember any of the people that you brought at that party? Remember any of the names?
I remember John F. Kennedy Jr. came, and he brought Daryl Hannah. I think he was dating Daryl Hannah at the time. And
she was in one of your earliest movies, right?
She was.
Daryl Hannah,
the
very first movie that you ever did, right?
It was called Speedway Junkie, which she was in. That was years later, of course.
Right.
But yeah, he was dating her at the time. I remember he came. He'd come to a bunch of my stuff over the years, but he came to that with 6 or 7 actors. I remember they all came in together.
Yeah, he was very close to the Naked Angels. That's how I met him. The only once or twice that I met him, he came. Naked Angels was a very famous theater troupe.
I remember it well.
That had their own theater. I think it was on 17th Street at the time.
Sure.
Sarah Jessica Parker, Matthew Broderick, Fisher Stevens, all those people
Ethan
that
Hawke,
went on to
Frank
be Ethan
Whaley.
Hawke. They all went on to become huge stars. But in those days, it was very new.
Yeah.
And I was one of the writers whose stuff they would read. I would come and bring my stuff. In those days, that's so crazy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was like a nice memory. So JFK Jr. came to your event with Daryl Hannah.
And we had a lot. I remember at the time. I mean, I'm trying to remember I don't remember every name we had at that time, but I remember Matt Dillon, who was very big at the time. He came.
Sure.
I remember we really had probably 10 or 15 big names who showed up at that. Plus all kind of the society people. And So it got in the paper. I remember.
Page 6. I'm sure I was on.
I'm sure it was page 6.
Yeah.
I think it got in People magazine too. It got in a bunch of the things, and that's why every like, who did this party, all the clubs found out it was me, and that's how I was able to transition to clubs, which was great for me because I was.
And you were still like 16?
I was 16.
Amazing.
At 16, I started doing Tunnel on Thursday nights with Michael Alec. Actually, it was the
And
club.
for people who don't know, Tunnel was like an old abandoned railroad tunnel.
Yeah.
And it was on the west side, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 27th and 12th.
27th and 12th. About any further west, you're in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you did that with Michael Alec?
With Michael Alec,
Well,
Thursday
he was
nights.
the one that got arrested for that murder, right?
He was that many years later. Yeah.
The Club Kid thing.
The Club Kids, but that was the kind of the launch of the real Club Kid era. So what was kind of cool that because of all the Club Kids, Tunnel wanted young kids.
Yeah, they got a lot of young kids.
A lot. And so it was fine for me to bring thousands. It was a huge, like
huge
4,000
space.
people.
Yeah, exactly.
So I could bring like I couldn't bring as many as I used to be able to with the other parties because it would be too young. I had to kind of wean my crowd a little bit, keep just like the older ones and the ones who looked club ready. So at that point, I was bringing like 1,000, 1,500 people a night, which fit into their 4,000 people, so it worked well. So I started doing that.
It's so amazing because in a comedy club, if there's 250 people, you feel like you really drew a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
But there's no comedy club that's holding like 4,000 people. This is amazing to me.
Well, it's a different era, and people really went out back then. I mean, it was a completely
that's
different
true.
era now. I mean, now you would never have. I can't imagine the last time we had 4,000 people at a venue that were, upscale. It doesn't really happen unless it's like a rave or something. But it's a very different world now. But so I remember I was doing Nels, and I was doing a Tunnel, and then I started doing Nels, who I don't know how I convinced them to let me do it too, and they just opened. So
Nels was huge, but interestingly enough, you wound up buying that club years
I did.
later.
Years
right?
later, I bought it. I always wanted to buy it.
That was the Plumm, wasn't it?
It was the Plumm. It
Plumm.
was NA and then the Plumm.
Yeah, NA was on Spring Street, if I remember, right?
No, it was in Nels.
That was the same location?
Same location.
For some reason, I thought NA was on Spring Street.
NA and Nels were the same place.
There was another club on Spring Street that had two initials. Well, but anyway.
Oh, so at times I was doing Nels and Tunnel. And Nels was very exclusive back then. So in Nels I could only bring like 250 people of like my top people. And they didn't have promoters back then. It was, it was a very successful club. I don't know how I even convinced them to let me do it. I try to even remember it. But I did.
Did you speak to Nell directly?
To Nell and to Lynn.
Was she in there in those days?
She was. And Lynn Wagenacht, who was Keith McNally's wife. Three of them owned it. Lynn's the one I dealt with normally. And the manager was named Tomas Moller, who actually later became a very good friend of mine. But I somehow convinced them that a lot of my friends had gone there. Some of my top kind of people, I guess, at the time, who they knew and saw me with them. So like, you could do a party, And I remember the first time I did it didn't work very well. I remember the first time they asked me to do a party. It was like on a long weekend, I think, on like Columbus Day or something. And I was like, do you want to do this? Because it was a dead night for them. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm going to bring a lot of people. They're like, well, they look like the kids you hang out with. I'm like, yeah, but they're going to be a lot of them.
A lot of them.
And they're like, oh, it's fine, just do it. I remember that, and everyone wanted to go to Nell's back then. It was the hot club of the city. We had thousands of kids outside, and they freaked out, and only let in people who they knew, who their doorman recognized. So only out of the 4,000 people I brought that night, we only got in probably 300 or 400, and then they pulled me into a meeting and yelled at me like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "I told you, it'd be a lot of people."
There'll be a lot of people. Well, you carried that tradition on. When you opened Veruka, it had a very strict door policy.
Oh yeah, that was. Veruka was the first club that I actually
owned.
That was my baby.
Right. And how did that come about?
We had been looking at spaces. I'd wanted to go to ownership. At the time I was 26 years old, and felt like I was ready.
You had been promoting for 10 years already.
Yeah, I'd done every job at a nightclub. I'd been a security, I'd been a door person, I'd been a promoter, I'd been, I've done everything you could do at a nightclub, PR. So I wanted to open a place, and we were looking for the right place, and we found this place on Broome Street, and it was at the time a little French restaurant, very small, but they had a furniture store above it. So a friend of mine had approached me, who went to a prep school with me and had followed my career a bit.
Now, by the way, were you still living in that apartment on 73rd and Columbus?
At that time,
that little
apartment? not by Veruka,
No.
I moved out when I was, I think, 18 or 19.
Into your own place again, of course.
Yeah. I moved to a nicer,
a larger place.
Yeah.
Not a broom closet.
The little one, the little one I had from the time I was 13 till I was about 18.
Mm-hmm.
Went to college. That was the harder part because I went to college. I went to Boston University, so I had to have a place in New York and Boston. That killed me. That was one of the harder parts of my life.
Well, it killed you in terms of traveling or in terms of finances?
Both.
Oh, both. Oh.
I had to have 2 apartments, and I had to travel back and forth.
You had to travel back and forth on the weekend, right? So you were in school during the week in Boston, and then on the weekends you came to do parties in the city.
Well, I wish it was that simple. What I would do on Tuesday, I would fly to Boston, go to class Tuesday night, fly back to New York Tuesday night, have an event Tuesday night, fly back to Boston Wednesday, go to class Wednesday. I had an event in Boston. I had a party on that Wednesday night. Then I'd go to class Thursday. Then I'd fly back to New York, stay here for the weekend.
Wow,
every week.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It was crazy.
And you were you paying your tuition with that?
Yeah, well, my father paid a little bit of it, part of my college tuition. But yeah, I paid probably what it amounted to. I paid probably half or 60% of my tuition, which was hard. And having 2 apartments, I was definitely close. You know.
So back to Veruka. So it had a store above it.
Yes.
And so you wound up combining the two? Because I remember the restaurant was downstairs, as I recall. I used to like to go down there and hang out. I would order caviar. For some reason, I remember that.
It was the owner, the guy who owned it was the owner of Lahal on Park Avenue, same owner.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah? One downstairs. So he sold it to us. So that was the big leap.
And you were there for 10 years, if I remember, right?
Yeah.
It was like 10 years of major celebrities. I used to see the Yankees there, and every big rock star was there. Every celebrity wanted to go to Veruka.
Yeah.
It was hard to park around there, by the way. How did you choose the name Veruka?
We had gone back and forth with names. I wanted I like a lot of, one of my favorite ways to name clubs is female names I like. And we were going back and forth on names, and one name came up, which was I'd watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and they have the character, the girl's name is Veruka Salt, and she was just spoiled, who wanted everything and wanted it now. It was kind of a joke on our crowd that our crowd wants everything, they want it now, so let's call it Veruka.
And that's so funny.
But what's funny about the name, though, is it also in Latin means a wart.
That's what I was going to say. I wanted to know if you knew that.
We did know it.
In my biology studies, I always saw Veruka.
You got a
Who would
Veruka.
call a
You
club
got a wart.
a wart?
It's funny, though.
In all the years I know you, I never asked you that.
Yeah, it's funny. Nobody ever mentioned it except for Latin American people. People who come, I have a bunch of friends who were from, like Brazil and stuff. They come up and be like, what's the name? I'd be like, Veruka. Like,
who calls a club
a wart?
that
means a wart, right? And I'm like, yeah, no, we know. I knew it before, and that was kind of the thing. I loved the name so much, I was like, let's do it anyway.
All your clubs had unusual names. Do you want to know something that I just realized now while I'm talking to you, that NA must have stood for Noel Ashman? I was going to say, what is NA? Where did that come from? And
it's long. That was a long story. A friend of mine actually named it. I had always loved the name MK, which was a club in the 80s.
I remember MK, yeah.
I always liked kind of initials. I thought they were kind of mysterious and kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to name it, and we're going through a million different initials. And we had all these initials who were thinking of naming it. And NA was one of them, and everyone just liked the way it sounded. And I'm like, but, I was a little hesitant. It was also my name, obviously. But...
Yeah, but it wasn't that obvious. I'm telling you. I always thought NA, and I never put it together till now. And I'm thinking, what could it have stood for?
Right.
Noel Ashman.
It wasn't really. I didn't really want to name it after me. That wasn't the point of it. But it just, out of all the initials, it just sounded the best. And everyone kind of voted on it, and everyone was like, all right, that's the name.
But you always had cool partners too. Like one of your longtime partners is Chris Noth from Sex and the City, Mr. Big. Mm-hmm. And so. How did those relationships come about? I think Michael Strahan was also a partner of yours in one of your clubs.
At a later club, at Leonora, yeah.
At a later club.
Yeah, a lot of those guys, Chris is dear friend of mine and just a great guy, very supportive and always a really good friend. And he loves nightlife, and I think he always, he was excited to do it. I think, there's something that was cool. He loved Nels, he loved the space, so it just was a natural fit. And I was out with him anyway, so we might as well do it together.
Do it together, right?
I mean, why the hell not? So yeah, I mean, Chris and like David Wells was also a partner in Plum and NA. So yeah, I like to have kind of different types of interesting partners. I think it makes a club more eclectic and interesting.
Why'd you transfer from NA to the Plum?
At the time,
because it was the same location, right?
Same location, yeah. It was one of the tough times in my career. I brought a partner in. It's kind of a very long story, which I won't bore with the details. But to sum it up, I had a partner who I shouldn't have brought in, and we had a big problem, and there was an issue. So I basically had to. We went to court. It was a very public thing at the time. And we closed the club for 2 years. By the way, there was a big lag between the two clubs, and I luckily won, and I was able to then reopen it, but we had to then
change the name. And the space stayed there, but it stayed empty for 2 years?
Yes, all year and a half, I think.
Nobody else came in that interim?
No, we were paying rent.
So you held on to the space, but because thinking that at some point you'd reopen it. Now, along with your unusual names, why the Plum? Where's that? With 2 M's, not even just like... Not 1 M, but 2 M's, the Plum.
I like my names that I do to be distinctive. So
when
you Google them, you don't have, if you put in,
there's no other place like the Plum, right? Yeah, it's going to come right
exactly.
up. Yeah.
That was a name I came up with. I love fruits. So we're going through different fruits. And it was funny, though, because it was on my list. I had a huge list. It's actually funny. I was actually talking to Chris Noth at that moment. And we were talking about names. I was giving all these fruit names. And I was eating. He's like, what the fuck are you doing? Fucking stop chewing. I'm like, what are you eating? I'm like, Plum. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, that's not a bad idea. Funny. It's one of my favorite fruits. So, but I was like, calling it Plum would be a little plain. It wouldn't pop. So then we came up with a 2M idea.
Well, it's a good thing you weren't eating a banana.
Very true.
That would have been so weird, calling a club the Banana. I don't know. I don't think it would have done as well. The Plum had kind of a mystique to it.
Yeah.
All your clubs, I mean, it's just, that whole history was amazing. Now, how does that transfer into producing movies? Because that's another huge part of your life. How does that come about?
Well, it's interesting.
I mean, you've produced 16 movies. Let me just get that clear for the audience. 16 movies. Already, that's unbelievable. It just makes you tired thinking about it, right? Knock wood, right?
Yeah. I've been very lucky. I really have, and I've had a lot of great people who really helped me. I mean, I'm very blessed to have a lot of friends who, from the beginning of my career, really, have really helped me. Who I never would have been able to do a lot of things I did without. I mean, I really owe it a lot to people around me. I've been very, very lucky. The movie thing was a funny thing. I had an assistant who used to actually give out my invites back in the day because he didn't have internet, so you had to have someone really run around
people
every
on the street handing out flyers,
invites,
right?
Yeah. And his name was Randall Emmett, and he was a really good guy. Really, really, really liked him.
Randall Emmett, he went on to become a major producer, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But at the time, he was in school. He was in the School of Visual Arts. So I really, he worked really hard. He was handing all the invites, and really hard-working guy, and I really liked him. Immediately, one of those people in life that you just see. I didn't know he'd be successful too. He's such a hard worker. I was like, I just had an affinity for him. So he worked for me for many years. Then he worked for Mark Wahlberg for a long time. And I guess between both of us, he got all those connections, and he called me in, I think it was 1999, and said, I'm going to start producing movies. So I'm like, cool, good for you. He's like, I want you to produce it with me. And I'm like, I'm a club owner. What the hell do I know about producing a movie? I have no idea what I'm doing. And he's like, dude, it's the same freaking skill. It's getting talent attached, it's raising money, it's knowing what's good, it's getting publicity and attention on it. It's exactly what you do. Mm-hmm. And I'm like thinking, it's kind of right. So I'm like, all right, I'll try it. And that was the first thing I ever did. It was called Speedway Junkie. I remember Gus Van Zandt executive produced it with us. It was it was Daryl Hannah, it was Jesse Bradford, Patsy Kinsit, Warren G, a whole bunch of interesting kind of eclectic people. Mm-hmm. And it went well, and I really enjoyed it. My mom used to always put me to bed, and at 8 o'clock like a normal 4-year-old should be. And I would stare at the ceiling until 3 in the morning. I could never go to sleep. And then she'd come at 7:30 to wake me up, and I'd be like, "Oh, Mom, I can't make give me 10 more minutes." So I've been like that. I was born that way. I'm a nocturnal person. I work best if I'm going to bed around 4 in the morning and waking up around 1. That's like my perfect day. So that's just the way my body works. So nightclubs worked easily for
usually we text each other about 2 a.m. And you're still up. So
I'm still up.
I'm thinking I'm the only person who's up. You're definitely up.
Yeah, I'm up. And but anyway, so that's how I got into nightlife. I think part of the reason why it was so easy for me. But
then you got into the movie business.
But then the movie thing, after I closed my last club, I was just burnt, and I wanted, I had never taken movies really seriously. I'd always done it more just for fun and interesting thing with friends, kind of a fun thing to do. So after I closed it, I took the next. I said to myself, let me take a year and not worry about opening another nightclub. Let me just focus on movies. And we got really lucky. We did almost 10 movies in basically a year.
10 movies in a year.
Just about.
What do you have coming up? What's the one that you did most recently? I was at a rap party for it, right?
The last one I shot was called 3 Days Rising, which was based kind of a modern day interpretation of Edgar Allan Poe's Fall of the House of Usher, which a friend of mine had, a guy named Craig Kakowski, who I had known for many years, had brought it to me. And his brother had written it, and I just loved the idea of it. And I thought there were a couple things we needed to move around and change, but I loved the idea of it. And I was like, I had a bunch of other movies I was going to do first. And I was like, I want to do this one first. Because it was just clever the way it was written. And we did it very low budget, but I really believe we had a concept of how to shoot it that we had agreed to, that we could get it done. And I was just fell in love with the idea, and I was lucky enough I called Ice-T actually.
Ice was in it. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Well, you always get like big names to be in your films, which is really cool.
Yeah, I get lucky, I guess.
The guy that you mentioned originally, was his name Emmett?
Yes.
Didn't he produce The Irishman?
He did. He produced the last 2 Scorsese movies.
Really?
Yeah, he's incredibly successful. I did 5 movies with him in the last year and a half. Like,
what are some of the names of the films so people can?
I did Gotti with him, the John Travolta.
Oh, with John Travolta, right?
Yeah.
How was that working with John?
He's awesome. He's a great actor. I mean, he's amazing. I mean, I couldn't even imagine anyone else playing that role. I mean, I think he was.
Yeah, he was perfect for it. Absolutely
amazing.
Perfect for it.
So with Randy, I did Gotti with John Travolta. I did a movie called Reprisal with Bruce Willis. A movie called Backtrace with Sylvester Stallone and Matthew Modine, and a movie called a horror movie, The Row. A movie called The Row with Lala Kent and Randy Couture and a bunch of people. So basically my bigger movies I do with Randy, I usually do with Randy, the bigger budget ones I do. And he's great. He's one of the best in business. He's brilliant at what he does, and I'm able to learn a lot from him, which I love doing. The only negative to doing those things is I have less creative control, because obviously they don't. All the producers I'm working with have been doing this a lot longer than I have, so they're like, hey, So I get less of what I creatively what I want, but I really enjoy doing it, learning. And Randy's one of my closest friends for 30 years now. So
Randy Couture?
No, Randy Emmett.
Oh, Randy Emmett.
Randall Emmett.
Yeah. Oh, Randall Emmett.
That's one of my oldest friends. So it's great working with him. He's just a great human being and a great guy to work with. And
it's so awesome to have a team like that around you, because that's the only way you can get things done.
Absolutely.
It's almost impossible to do stuff by yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing working with him, and I learn a lot, and it's fun to work with someone that you're also close with.
Well, I hope you can bring him in to do the film I wrote.
Yeah, exactly. But the other things I've been doing, so I also, besides the ones with Randy, I've also been doing a bunch of indies, which are very New York centric, because I'm a real New Yorker, and I really like New York films. I always have. I also do a bunch of independent films, which I've done without Randy, which are a much smaller budget. And those are interesting for me, too, because I get a lot of creative control of those, because those don't have a lot of people besides me producing it. Like 3 Days Rising, I did with just me and Ice-T. And the director, Craig, also was producing it, but that was it. So it's great, because it gives me a lot of creative control. So it's amazing what I'm doing, because I'm kind of doing both. I'm doing the bigger budget movies where I get to learn, and I'm doing the smaller budget movies where I can exert a lot of creative control.
Yeah, that's amazing that you get to do both.
Yeah.
And 10 movies in a year, there's like basically unheard of.
Yeah,
that's
just
phenomenal.
We're incredibly lucky to have done it.
So tell me some crazy stories that happened in your club days. What do you remember? Like some of the insane things that went on? Because people are fascinated by that. Can you tell?
Well, I got to be careful.
Yeah, well, of course.
Certainly we've had a lot. But, wow. I mean, one of the craziest ones I think I've ever seen in my life was the Guns N' Roses, which was well publicized at the time.
Tell us about it.
When I opened Plum, we were just opening up and we were doing Rosario Dawson's birthday party.
Rosario Dawson, okay.
Her birthday party, yeah. It was booked on, it was a Thursday. And I remember Axl Rose had been hanging out at the club a bunch. And we were all drunk one night, and we have a mutual friend who was talking to him, and he was saying that, I'd love, he was about to, they hadn't played since 1991. And they were.
So it was their reunion.
Yeah, this was before they got back together in 2006, and they went on that huge world tour. So this was right before they went on the world tour, and they hadn't played since 1991 at that moment together, publicly at least. So I remember. So he said, I'd love to play at a place like this, and I'm like, sure, no problem, whatever you want. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought, he's a busy guy. He's about to go on a world tour. The last thing he wants to do is play at a small club for him. He's playing stadiums. But the night before he calls us up, he's like, we want to do it. And I had a heart attack. I was like, tomorrow? I'm like, okay. He's like, I don't want any money. Just pay my sound guy. And so the sound guys called me, and they dragged us over the calls with the money. It was very expensive. He had like his Madison Square Garden sound guys. But it was, anyway, so they set it up, and I had literally 10 hours to promote it. What was funny is I didn't even need that long.
You didn't need it, I'm sure.
I didn't need it. I could have promoted that in 20 minutes. And, all I had to do is I had all my assistants come. I had like 12 assistants at my house.
Yeah, I always get, you have the most amazing assistant. When you do an event, I get emails from 20 different people all about that event. Always amazing. Beautiful girls. On Facebook, on like every social media platform, I'm inundated with invites. So you really know how to do that. That's incredible.
Yeah, I have some very good people.
But were they close to Rosario Dawson? Is that why they came to play there?
No, they had never met actually.
Oh, really?
It was just random that they happened to be the same night. Yeah. We had just opened the club. I don't think we were even officially open yet. We were basically in preview parties.
It was a preview party.
Yeah.
So how did it go?
Well, it was funny. They were supposed to be there, I remember, at 10 to do a quick sound check. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we had everybody. I mean, it was by 9 o'clock. It was just like, it's strange, same place, same venue, Nell's. Mm-hmm. But it was just like that one party where you have thousands of people showing up. Because everyone heard about Guns N' Roses playing. That's all you need to hear. And I remember I was, so they were supposed to be there at 10. So I remember we had everything set up for them. The sound and everything was set. They weren't there, though. I'm having a heart attack. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm calling Axl, and everyone's calling him, and he's going right to voicemail.
He's not answering.
And I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my God. And I remember everyone's there. I remember Richard Johnson from Page 6 at the time.
Sure, every press person would be there to cover that.
Yeah, walked up to me, and by the way, now it's 11, now it's 12, now it's 1, and they're still not there.
Oh my God. Oh.
So I'm sweating, and I'm real nervous. I remember Richard Johnson walks up to me, and I said, all right, between you and me, man to man, this is bullshit. You were just trying to get people here, right? I'm like, no, they'll be here. He's looking at me like, all right, we'll see. I'll wait. And everyone was getting pissed off. And I'm like, oh no. So I kept calling. And then I remember I got a text. He was out front. I remember going out and seeing Axl and just hugging him. I remember just not wanting to let go. Just being so happy. I don't think I've ever been so happy to see anybody in my entire life.
My hands are sweating just hearing that story.
Yeah,
because I know when you produce something, you just need everybody to be there. So what time is this? Like 1 in the morning?
So it was like 1:30, 2,
oh my
maybe
God.
2 in the morning.
2 in the morning.
It was.
And he was supposed to be there at 10.
Yeah. They weren't going to go on until like 11, as I recall, but they were supposed to be there early. And anyway, so I'm walking him in. I'm just so happy. I'm in such a good mood now that he's here.
Of course, yeah.
I'm not a liar, because I don't think I would be able to show my face ever again had he not shown up. Because everybody was there. I mean, everyone. You can imagine. Every media person, every celebrity, every actor, every model. I mean, everybody was there that night. And I remember walking him in. And as we walked in, I remember Lenny Kravitz, Kid Rock, and I think it was Jimmy Page, were all in a corner table. And he's like, oh, let me go say hello to them. So I'm walking with him, and I remember he goes, shakes their hands, hugging everybody, and Axel's like kind of right here, I'm right here. And I remember Patrick Mullen and Richard Johnson had come up, and Patrick was taking pictures, and Richard was right there, and like, you know, gives me a pat, like, you're a lucky guy. I'm like, yes, I am. And I remember kind of Axel was kind of in front of me, I was a little bit behind, and some guy walked over who I didn't see his face. He was a smaller guy, and I remember him tapping Axel. And I remember Axel was talking to, I think, Lenny Kravitz at the time, and kind of like said something to him, and then went back to his conversation. And then he kind of nudged him again, and I couldn't really see what was happening. It was kind of, you know, but out of nowhere, the guy hauls off and punches him in the face and knocks him out. And knocks Axel down. Punched
Axel in the face?
Punched him in the face and knocks him down.
Oh, my God.
And I didn't see how it started or really why. All I know is Axel gets up and goes to hit him back. And he gets kind of in a stance to like fight him, and it was Tommy Hilfiger, who I didn't realize it was.
He's a martial artist.
Yeah, and I didn't see it because I was behind, so I didn't realize it was Tommy. And Patrick Mullen gets that shot of like Axel going to punch him and Tommy Hilfiger defending himself, and I was just looking at this
this can't be happening.
Can't be happening.
This can't be happening.
Stop.
It's too bizarre.
Yeah, like just stop. All I want to do is get him on stage.
He finally shows up at 2 a.m. and
everybody
Tommy
happy.
Hilfiger knocks him out.
Yeah, we didn't need this. And I remember.
Well, what was the story? What was the reason he did that?
Well, anyway, so it got separated, and security separated him and everything, and we were down in the office. And apparently, I don't know. I think Tommy had been sitting
something
there.
with Tommy's wife, right?
Yeah, I think Tommy's wife had a drink that was there, and Tommy was sitting there, and he felt that Axel had come in and moved his wife, and he felt that he
was insulted.
Somehow insulted his wife, and that was how the whole thing started. You know, I mean, it's weird because Tommy's been at my club a million times. He's a sweetheart. He's a really nice guy. And his brother Andy's a great guy, too.
Yeah, Andy's an old friend.
Yeah, but they're awesome people. Mm-hmm. And Axel's an awesome guy. So how it's just...
alcohol.
You have weird misunderstandings
Alcohol
sometimes.
happens.
But it was just the wrong time for me. I was just like, please don't let this happen. And I remember I was in the office with Axel, and he was debating what he was going to play. And I'm like, oh, no. Please.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, oh, no, please. But eventually they said as long as I go and introduce them, that
they'll play.
And I
so where was Slash and all the other guys?
Slash wasn't there. It was a bunch of guys from his old band and his new band together played.
Oh, okay.
And I remember they had a big karaoke screen that they brought with them. So basically all the words of the songs were behind them. So they were playing, and you had the words that everyone was singing along. It actually ended up being amazing. They were only supposed to play for, I think, a half an hour. They ended up playing for like 2.5, 3 hours.
Really?
Nobody even... I mean, it was
nobody
so crowded.
Left,
it was so crowded, uncomfortable, nobody cared. And everyone just... It ended up being an amazing night, and everything was great. But it was probably the most stressful night I've ever had in my life.
It's a good thing you had a good heart.
Yeah, it could have easily gone out.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I felt it because people don't know how hard it is to produce an event, any event, even something like a podcast.
Yeah.
When you have to coordinate people and make sure you have all the equipment and the lights and the sound, the people come in on time, and it's an amazing thing. So to do something like that is just huge. Most people will never have the experience.
It's very true
of what that's like.
Yeah,
it's just incredible.
There's so many things that could always go wrong. You never know. Murphy's Law. Somehow it will go wrong.
Murphy's Law is real. Before we talk about your politics, I want to ask you to talk about something in general. Not everybody gets an easy life. People get obstacles put in their path, just in general. Would you say something about that, like how to achieve your goals and overcoming obstacles? Because this show it's I talk about it as being a positive energy kind of show. It's an inspirational show to show people that life is not always easy, that things get put in your path. In my own experience, I always talk about how badly I stuttered. I stuttered so badly through my 20s and beyond, I couldn't even say my name. I could never say Gurian, and I had to retrain my thinking. It took me many years of very hard work because no one was able to help me. And that was a really major obstacle for me because I knew that
That's amazing, actually, being a comic.
Well, it's a miracle. And now I use my voice in everything I do. When I was in practice, I had to talk to people. People are not going to be comfortable with a stuttering doctor. They don't feel, you know what I mean? It doesn't. It's not. It doesn't lend an air of confidence. So that was my personal obstacle that I had to overcome. But everybody has something that they have to overcome. And you're such a positive force, especially in the New York scene. You've influenced people all over with everything that you do. So could you speak about that a little bit, about what happens, like how you overcome, how you draw on inner strength, and what that means to you?
Well, thank you. I think, look, I think everybody has things they go through. I've been very lucky. I have a good group of friends that have always kind of backed me up. And I think that that's one of the things that's really helped. I think you just have to in life, sometimes things go wrong. It's hard for me, when things have gone wrong, because, I've generally been able to do a lot of things that have worked. But, sometimes things just don't work. And you have to sometimes take a step back, analyze what didn't, and then do it, recalibrate and then start over again. And I think that's what happens in life. I think you have to do that, and you have to just keep going. You have to know that things are going to end up being okay, and that sometimes things go wrong. And you can't, I always say in life, you can't, when things are up, never get too happy, because it's always going to come back down. And when things are down, never get too depressed, because it's always going to come back up. And the idea is you want to try to stay, and I haven't always succeeded at this, but I certainly try to stay somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. Never believe the hype. Never believe your press when you're doing well, but never believe the horrible things people say about you when you're doing poorly, because everybody goes through it. I don't care how successful anybody is, everyone in life at some point has failed.
Have you had down times?
Oh yeah, I've had horrible down times. I mean, I've had times where I was just questioned everything, and just like, how could I possibly, from when I was very young to getting kicked out of my house to, feeling just like nobody cares about me. I'm 13 years old. I have nowhere to go, and I have no one to, it was a very hard time for me. And I was incredibly depressed. I mean, I even contemplated suicide at that point in life. It was very difficult for me. And I've had that a bunch of times. I think, the thing I told you about at Plum, NA and Plum, where I had a partner who really betrayed me, that was just devastating for me.
Isn't that horrible sometimes? It's like a marriage that goes bad. You think you could trust somebody. Yeah,
it was someone I knew for many years, and who I really cared about, who if he had asked me to give him half my money, I would have, because he was in trouble, I would have done it. It was one of those kind of people who I would have done anything for. And it was not just the business failure because of what had happened, but it was that hurt me. That wasn't even the worst part of it. The worst part was the personal betrayal. I guess I have a romanticized version of friendship and life, and I like to think that people who I'm very close to, I always will be. And I'm lucky that a lot of times that's been true for me, but occasionally it's not. So I've been through some very hard times, which have really been, tested everything. And I'm usually lucky that I've had other friends who have picked me up and said, how can I help? And I've been very, very fortunate that people who have really, really backed me.
They have your back. That's so important. Yeah, because it shakes you to the core when something like that happens. It's hard to believe in anybody, but at some point you have to try and trust people. Yeah. And it's really hard. It's hard not to become cynical.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. It's hard when money's involved with things, because people get, I guess we all do at certain points get greedy. But it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard when you have friendship and business that mix, because
it's like divorce. Yeah. You can't get divorced unless you were once married.
Exactly.
Right? You have to be married first in order to get divorced, and we know how common that is. And hopefully, when you get married, you think you could trust that person. You plan to be with them forever.
Right.
You don't plan to be married at just a short time. And we see how that works out. So it's devastating to people as a human being. Do you feel that you're a sensitive person?
I'd like to think so, yeah. I think I am very sensitive, actually. I mean, I think that I probably take things personally that I probably shouldn't. It's probably one of my downsides of my personality. I think, I can get very hurt by people who if someone's close to me, they can hurt me in a way that most people maybe don't have the same take it as personally. I think it very personally when someone.
No, I think it's hard not to be that way. I'm a very sensitive person, and it took me many years to learn to own my sensitivity more as a strength than as a weakness, because there are people who will try to manipulate you because of your sensitivity.
Absolutely.
But if that's your interest, what I had to learn for myself is that if that's your basic nature, you have to learn to own that. You can't change your basic nature.
Right.
That's who you are. You can't make yourself a person who doesn't care. You can try in certain circumstances, but your basic nature always stays the same. And I think that's why people gravitate towards you, because you're a warm and welcoming person. You're a wonderful host. When you come in, first of all, you're always late to your own parties.
That's true.
I know that when I go to your parties and it's 10 o'clock, somewhere around midnight, you're going to wander in with a posse of people, you know.
I've never been good with time.
No, and you always give everybody a warm hug, and you always thank people for coming. You're very gracious that way. And I think that really matters, because a person who's not sensitive is not a people person, usually. Mm-hmm. You're a people person, and that's why people gravitate to you and feel comfortable with you, and that's spectacular. And now you've taken that into the political realm. Mm-hmm. I don't know, were you managing Bo Dietl's run for mayorship, or were you just supporting him?
I wasn't. I was just helping with Bo.
You were just helping.
Bo has always been, talk about people who have really been there for me, and Bo Dietl's been there for me my whole life. I mean, he's just one of the best people I know. So when he ran for mayor, I was gonna help him any way I could. Absolutely love him. He's kind of the second father to me. Really?
Well, for anyone who might be not be familiar with Bo Dietl, he was ex NYPD and an honored detective and an actor who's been in so many things. I know he was in HBO's Vinyl. He was in Goodfellas, I think. He was
Goodfellas,
so many movies.
The Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, and he would have been
Carlito's Way.
He would have been a great mayor too. I contributed. I was there at the events that you threw for him, and now you're backing someone else, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny.
There was a big article in the New York Post about you this past week.
Yes, I never. I've always helped. My uncle had run for Congress at one point, so I helped him a little bit, and I helped Bo for sure. But I've never gotten involved in the political realm in any serious way.
Well, it was like movie producing. You never did it before, and now you're doing it.
Let's just try it.
Let's just try it. What do you got to lose, right?
And a friend of mine approached me with a guy named Miguel Hernandez, who's running for Congress against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't quite sure what to do. They wanted me to be political director and media director of the campaign, and I had never done that before. So I had to kind of think about it, because I'm a little busy now with my films, and there were a bunch of things we're trying to do. We're talking about other spaces now for clubs, and so I'm a little tied up. But when I thought about it, I kind of, I'm a person who really loves this country. I love America. I think that it's a very unperfect place. We've had certainly horrible things that we've done in our history of this country, from slavery to not helping the Jews in the Holocaust. There are a lot of issues.
That's horrible.
There are a lot of mistakes.
Turning that ship away.
Oh, terrible. I mean, there are
a
lot of terrible things that this country has done. But the great thing about this country is it can be fixed, and it's set up in a way where we can learn from our mistakes and build on it.
And at least we're willing to do that.
Right.
Now, other countries are not.
Yeah.
Right.
People who live in America
ourselves.
don't realize that the world is not like America.
Right.
America's a very unique place.
Very unique place.
And I really love America, and I'm very patriotic. And when I see people talking about socialism, it really upsets me. I was brought up. My mother is a very, very liberal Democrat. My father is a little bit more in the middle. I've always been kind of politically very conservative, fiscally, but very liberal socially. I'm pro-choice, certainly pro-LGBT rights in every way, pro-gay marriage. Any social issue, marijuana, no big deal to me. Even though I've only smoked 3 times my entire life. But yeah, I mean, I'm for letting having government out of our lives and individual freedom, I think is
right. You're an independent thinker. Basically, you make a choice based on what's presented to you, what makes sense.
Right. And I think America, that's what's so great about America, is that we have individual rights here. Our government doesn't tell us what to do. Mm-hmm. And when I see people talking about socialism, where the government takes over every aspect of our life, so now people can't make choices for themselves and their families, it was upsetting. I think, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez seems like a very I've only met her once, I think, but she seems like a very energetic and sincere person. But I think that her policies I don't think either she hasn't thought them out clearly, or I just completely disagree. But I think they're very, very dangerous.
Absolutely.
I think it's one of the most dangerous things this country has faced.
And the fact that she believes in them so strongly makes it worse.
Right. And the fact that a lot of people, it sounds good, when someone like her or maybe Sanders is spouting out, we'll give free this, we'll give free that, forget about this. I always think of it as like a mousetrap, The reason why mousetraps work is because the mouse doesn't understand why the cheese is free, So they think, we'll just go eat the cheese. But they don't understand there's always when you take free stuff, there's always someone who pays for it. And that would be us as Americans who end up paying for it. And if we give away free things to everybody, the country will collapse. You can't do that for the obvious reason.
Right.
And everybody learns when they grow up. You have a budget. You have to learn. It's one of the things everyone learns with their own families. You have to have a budget. You have to live within your means. If you just, all right, now just buy everything, eventually it's going to come back to haunt you. And that's what's going to happen with socialism. And I think it's very dangerous. So I'm passionate about that. To me, whether you're a very liberal Democrat or a very conservative Republican, I understand both. And as I said, I've always been somewhere in the middle. I've always been independent, always gone both ways. But when it comes to socialism, that's another thing. And I think that a lot of young kids who maybe don't know what socialism really is and don't see how the Nazi, socialism, Nazis were socialists, Russia, Soviet Union was,
of course, yeah,
was socialist, Venezuela, Cuba, and they always say, look at Norway. Well, Norway's a capitalist, free market society. They have different things than we do, but it's not socialist. It's capitalist, and that's the difference. People say, okay, well, the taxes are higher there. True, but there's no minimum wage either. So they're very pro-business in other ways. So it's capitalism done a little bit differently, but it's certainly not socialism. All those countries that work, like Norway, Sweden, those are all capitalists.
So what are you doing for Miguel Hernandez?
So anyway, Miguel Hernandez is a guy who was interesting to me because he's a blue-collar worker. He's a guy who's been a plumber. He's been a superintendent. He's been a builder. And he's running for Congress, and he wants to work on jobs. The community that they're both.
In other words, he has a similar background to her, but opposing views.
Well, I don't think no, very different. I mean, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez didn't grow up in that district. She grew up in Westchester in a very middle class, very comfortable atmosphere. She's never had that. That's the difference. Is that Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, where I respect her enthusiasm, and I respect that she gets out there and does it. I mean, what she did winning that election was very, admirable. So the things I respect about her, it's not that I hate her. I just think that she's very misguided when it comes to policy. And I think that she has not helped her community at all. I think she's really hurt her community. If you look at her community, it's not. The whole country has been booming, except for little areas.
Well, they lost the Amazon deal because of that,
which was crazy. I mean, here you have $25,000 jobs to that specific community, and she just let it go. And I understand the issue that you don't want to give huge companies tax breaks, but it's more important to get jobs and help your community, help our country build. I think that there's too much in her background that's looking at what everyone else has. I should have as much as that person. No, let's give everyone. It's like a rising tide lifts every boat, and let's help everybody.
Everybody have an opportunity.
And let's not become a country where we look at everyone else and what they have and envy it. And it's one of the biggest problems I think we have is that you have to, whatever you have. There are people who have a lot more than certain people, a lot less. But you got to be happy with what you have, and you got to be. I just think this whole thing of let's take that person's and take that person's thing. It's exactly what happens in a socialist and communist society, and it always ends up the same way, where the government takes control of everything. People lose complete freedoms. There are horrible things like in Cuba, millions of deaths from the Castro regime, and I just think it's a rabbit hole that's very scary.
Well, look, I don't know how you manage to do all the things that you do, but I'm honored that you came on with me today. This has been very special for me. I've been looking forward to doing this for a long time, and you are you're a perfect example of the things that I always talk about overcoming obstacles, accomplishing things, when you get beaten down, you get back up again, and you go on to accomplish a lot of stuff. And I'm proud to say that you're a friend, man.
Definitely.
Really.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So this is Jeffrey Gurian, your host for the Comedy Matters TV podcast here on the stage of the comic strip, the Legendary Club. I actually did the book on the comic strip, Laughing Legends, the book that Chris Rock wrote the introduction for. This is an iconic club. Everybody's in here. Jerry Seinfeld, Billy Crystal, Ray Romano, Paul Reiser, Gilbert Gottfried, Susie Essman. They all came out of this one club starting in 1976. And I'm here doing the podcast from the stage where Jerry Seinfeld and Adam Sandler recently did their Netflix specials. So I hope you guys will watch and subscribe and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jeffrey Gurian. And I hope to see you next week. Every week I'll be bringing you interesting people who have something positive to say, because that's the goal of the show, to put positive energy out to the universe. Until then, see you next time. Noel, where can people find you? Tell people where they find you. I'm sure you're all over the place online, but where can people find you?
A good way is on Instagram at Noel Ashman, NoelAshman. Or Twitter at Noel Ashman, or Facebook, or NoelAshman.com.
Great. And any particular thing coming up that you want people to know about? Any event?
Well, we'll have a bunch of events coming up soon, but right now you'll be seeing 3 Days Rising, which is a movie I did with Ice-T and Mickey Rourke, Frank Whaley, Peter Green, a bunch of people that will be coming soon. We're editing it, so that'll be coming out soon, and a bunch of other movie projects as well.
Great. We'll make sure to keep on top of all that. Thank you. We're out.